Visionary, world changer, leader, preacher of the word. Welcome to Lead Like Paul.
Hi everybody, my name is Grady, and I'm the author of this book, Lead Like Paul, and I am so glad to welcome you to this study that we're going to be doing together. I wrote this book, Lead Like Paul, because I am very concerned right now about the crisis of leadership that we're facing in the church today. You probably noticed that we've had a lot of moral failure recently. We've got churches that are struggling because of leadership issues. We've got pastors who are resigning because of moral failures. We've got whole ministries that are collapsing because of character problems. And that's why I began to study the life of the Apostle Paul, because I believe that the Apostle Paul is our template for Christian leadership. For the past year, I've been studying Paul's life. I've been digging into his writings, and I have just become convinced that we need to go back to the New Testament and reclaim what New Testament leadership was all about. So we're going to be doing this study. It's 21 chapters plus the introduction. And so we're going to be together for 22 sessions. I decided to make these short videos just to help you study this book together. I believe it's so important that we as Christians get together in small groups and process what we're learning. So I hope that you and your friends have gotten together. Feel free to get a cup of coffee when we do these studies. And you can read the chapter and then get together, grab your coffee, and then have a great discussion. And these videos will just help you prompt those discussions. In this intro to the book, I looked at who the Apostle Paul is, and just by way of reminder, I want to go over those points with you. Number one, we learned that Paul was a model convert. Paul went from darkness to light. He was aggressively fighting the church, and then he had this encounter with Jesus Christ on the road to Damascus, and all of a sudden he was a changed man. He surrendered his will. He gave up that fight. He was fighting so hard against Jesus, and then he was transformed by the resurrection power of Christ and by actually seeing him on that road. Number two, we learned that Paul was a brilliant theologian. Paul said that he had an encounter with Christ. He didn't learn the gospel so much from people as he learned it from a real encounter with Christ, not only on that road to Damascus, but the Bible tells us that he went to Arabia and he had this revelation of Jesus. And through that revelation, Paul had a download from heaven about the grace that we have received through Christ. And Paul actually gave us not only commentary on the Gospels through his letters, but he gave us all these vocabulary words that we're going to be using in this study. Words like salvation, redemption, sanctification, these kinds of words that the church throughout history has used now to understand the Gospels and what Jesus did for us. Number three, Paul was a bold preacher and a missionary. We're going to be talking a lot in this study about what Paul did when he walked more than 10,000 miles in the Roman Empire to take the message of Jesus to the world. And that required him to have incredible courage and also incredible perseverance because of all that he went through to take the gospel to the world. And we can definitely appreciate, as we're doing this study, we can appreciate Paul's boldness and then the way that that same boldness has been lived out by so many others through history who took the gospel to the world. He was a great example for us. We're also going to see that Paul was a spiritual father. He told us in 1 Corinthians that he was a spiritual father to the church. He also told the Thessalonians that he was with them as a nurturing mother. So Paul was like this nurturer who he planted the New Testament church, and then he cared about those people. He nurtured that seed, and then the church grew. And of course, everywhere Paul went, he planted those churches. And then the gospel began to spread throughout Europe, throughout the Middle East area. And all the Christianity that we see in the world today came from those churches that were planted in that first century time. So we can be grateful for this man who was a spiritual father to us. And then also we learn that Paul was an anointed apostle. That word apostle means one who is sent. And it's not just somebody who volunteers to go and tell the gospel. There is a specific and powerful anointing that God places on certain people to establish the gospel and to establish the church. And Paul was one of those anointed people who did that. So we're going to study about that in this book. And then finally, we learn that Paul was a New Testament Moses. There's an interesting comparison in this introduction about the similarities between Paul and Moses. Moses, God used to lay the foundations of the old covenant, and Moses received revelation from God about the tabernacle. But Paul, God used in a very special way to receive the revelation of grace about Jesus Christ in the gospel. And then he received the blueprints, if you will, for the New Testament church. And so we can see that Paul was kind of like Moses, was used in a certain way specifically to establish that old covenant revelation, but God used Paul to establish and to receive that new covenant revelation. So that's what we're going to be looking in, and we're going to be studying this in the introduction. And I want to just encourage you, if you're doing this study together as a group, come together, pick a night that works for you, or maybe it's a lunch Bible study, whatever you decide you want to do with your group. Bring your refreshments, bring your coffee, and get to know one another. And then as you study each chapter, you'll notice that at the end of each chapter, there are some specific discussion questions that you can use to guide your conversation. And then at the very end, there is a prayer that you can pray together, or the leader of your group can pray that prayer. And I believe God is going to minister to us. I believe he's going to speak to us very clearly. And I believe he's going to use this book to train many of us in godly Christian leadership. That's why I wrote this, because I think we need leaders today who will live their lives like the Apostle Paul. So I encourage you to get to know one another, share your hearts with one another, and I pray you're going to really enjoy this study of Lead Like Paul.